Welcome to the gold standard here on the 440 Sports Network. That is Emma Lingan. I am Braden Gall. Of course, we are brought to you by Sinkers Beverages and Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. That is correct. Okay, Emma, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. So here's the deal. My children have been out of school since December 21st, and today is the first day of school. Praise the good Lord, baby Jesus. My oldest daughter is in school. My youngest is still not. Because everyone in this city has the flu. And who knows, maybe half the Nashville Predators do as well, based on how they played against Winnipeg on Tuesday evening. We have much to discuss, of course. Lots of young players getting some ice time, Emma, and I'd like to know, of all of these good, young, talented pieces, how many of them, in your opinion, have sort of earned the right to stick, the way maybe Zach LaRue has, the way maybe Adam Wilsby has, obviously on IR. Of course, injuries are a big part, injuries and insult, of course, with the way they played on defense in particular to the Jets. Frankly, the way they played against Calgary was not all that encouraging either. They got a couple of power play goals and a great performance from Juuse Saros. So we'll talk about the injuries and what that means for the team moving forward. I do want to ask if you're concerned about Saros. I don't think any of the goals in particular against Winnipeg were all that bad on his side of the ledger. So we'll talk about Saros because there's been a lot of goals allowed in the last few weeks for him, or pitching a shutout. It's either feast or famine with him. And so a lot of stuff to get to. And then I want to get into the psychology of like where this team is right now, which is a little bit nebulous and vague, but I'm curious because they've been away from home for a long time. I'm interested to get back into the arena to talk to them over the course of the next few days and sort of just figure out like what are they going through right now? What's this all about? Because there's a lot of teams in sports, Emma, that are good one year and then not the next with a lot of the same pieces. And sometimes there's no explanation for it. So I'd like to know where their heads are at on that, because it's very complicated to understand and explain. And I am sure they've been searching for the answers to those questions all year. So not a lot to talk about today, Emma. That's all. Just that.
Nothing going on.
Nothing going on. While Yaroslav Askarov is playing extremely well. Just,
Why'd you have to go there? That wasn't necessary.
Because it's fun. It's fun. Hello to Patrick and to Kevin. How are you guys? Patrick says I want to read this. No one has screened Saros this season as effectively as Luke Shen, says Patrick. That would have been on the Morrissey goal, I believe is what he's talking about there. All right, so we'll get to a lot of stuff. Sinkers Beverages, though, a great local liquor store here in East Nashville, 4-time liquor store of the year. You guys know the drill. I realize that many of you, as am I right now, currently on January 8th, not drinking this January, not because of dry January, but because my body told me I needed to do that. And so I'm taking care of myself. And you know what? Great non-alcoholic options, great THC options, all of that stuff. Great options at Sinkers Beverages. So you can still swing by. You can have those beers that are beer without the beer. I don't know how they do that, Emma. I've never considered ordering one. But you know what? I'm going to have a few this January because it sounds good. It sounds delicious. And they're pretty good. They're very tasty. I've tried a few lately over the holidays. So go try them.
You're triggering me right now because do you know how bad it is to have a birthday in a month where everyone decides that they're not going to drink? Everyone's cold. Everyone's sad because the holidays are over. It's just like, it's a horrible time. And so
sad because they're over.
Well, okay. Well, maybe because they don't have children who are at home like you do. But yeah, I'm like, I don't know. The whole dry January thing. I'm like,
I never understood it.
I mean, like, whatever. I get it. But like for one day, can you maybe like take one day off and then extend it into the first day of February? Like,
well, ultimately, that's the biggest problem with New Year's resolutions is that it's a pass fail. Like, and life is not pass fail. Life is gray area. Life is moderation. Life is like, if you eat too much fast food, instead you should go to Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. But if you eat too much fast food, like you don't have to go perfect without fast food to call like it's a success if you just cut back 90% of your fast food intake. If you cut back 90% of your drinking, that is success. The problem with New Year's resolutions is we define success as a pass fail. And if everybody's going to fail. And if you do that, psychologically, you're setting yourself up for failure. And so it's all about New Year's intentions, Emma. My intent is to drink a lot less in January and maybe in February as well, based on my age. And I'm doing that so far. And you know what? When the Packers play on Sunday, I'm going to have a cocktail. That's it. And I'm going to get that boost from Sinker's Beverages.
See, I wish that my friends who are all doing dry January would make it their intent to drink less and maybe make an exception on their friend's birthday and have a mimosa or two at brunch. And
does your birthday fall on a Saturday or Sunday?
it's on a Sunday.
Oh, yeah, you got to have a mimosa at brunch.
Like, come on.
You got to. Yeah, no doubt about it. I will drink a mimosa on Sunday for you.
Thank you.
How about that? Even though I'm definitely not invited to the party.
Hey, come on. You and I might be the only ones drinking. So
Josh says, get the kids back to school, and they're going to get snowed out after 2 days. In fact, that's the truth. Like, my daughter will go back tomorrow, and then Friday they'll be back home. Which, I'm not going to lie, the sledding with the kids is awesome. And this is what we have. This is the fun stuff we have to talk about on a Nashville Predators podcast right now. Because at the end of the day, this team is just incapable of consistently performing. They're incapable of staying healthy. They're incapable of finding good balance. They're just one thing is working, Emma. The other thing is not. When the power play works against Calgary and Annunen works, the rest of the team is terrible. Like Saros played well, I thought, on Tuesday night against Winnipeg and got totally hung out to dry by the defense. At one point, I think Willie, just during the broadcast, was just like, look, it's pretty simple. They're just not good on defense. And like, he didn't use those words. But when Coach Willie is just on the broadcast saying they've got to be better on defense, it's gotten pretty bad. And so, the Vancouver game, I almost throw out the window. They were heavily favored in that game because Vancouver's just they're just in a pickle right now. They're in a spot of whatever, whether it's players not getting along or injuries or just whatever.
Yeah, they were missing Quinn Hughes and Philip Hronek, and there's the whole JT Miller, Elias Pettersson drama. Like, yeah. It would have been embarrassing if the Predators did not win that game.
Yes, I could not believe how favored. They were like minus 150 or something in that game. Heavily favored going into that game. Go Dog says, definitely looks like the big one. So they say is coming here Friday. National severe weather says 4 to 7 inches on Friday. So everybody, I've already been to the grocery store. So already been to the grocery store. I'm making chili. I'm going to go to Sinkers today and stock up on all my other needs for the playoff weekend. We got college football and pro football. Go Dogs also says the snow is more exciting than the Preds these days, unfortunately. There you go. All right. There you go. Okay, so inconsistency, here's the thing I want to ask about. Then we'll get to the injuries. Is there any possible way to pinpoint what is happening here? Because this is not a new thing. They are consistent in that they are inconsistent since the beginning of the year. And after the first 5 games they lose, they find some success, and then they don't. And then they go on a 10-game losing streak, and then they feel like they've played well going into the break. And then they come out and they get roasted. Then they go into another little part of the road trip, and they play really well in a couple of games. And then they come back. And again, Winnipeg is very good. And I remember on a preview podcast with our official predictions, I said, let's start at the top. And I asked about Winnipeg, and you both scoffed at me, by the way, for the record.
I mean, I think that's a pretty common, like, I will gladly take the L on that. Like, I admit, I think it was a pretty common assumption around the league that Winnipeg was not going to be this good this year. So I will eat crow on that one. They were
for now.
For now. Yeah. I mean, they do have a history of choking either late in the season or in the playoffs or both. So I mean, like, there's still time, still could happen, but yes, so far we're now halfway through the season. They have outperformed expectations, and I will take the L on that.
But they have really talented skaters. Maybe here's an idea, Predators. Don't allow Kyle Connor to walk up to your goalie in the high danger slot and shoot on him. Perhaps. Just an idea. They have really good skaters, really good offensive players. That hasn't changed in years. They have a Vezina caliber goalie who might be the best on the planet. That hasn't changed in years. And they keep finding pieces to sort of supplement the roster. And they're look, when you are number 1 team in the league or number 2 in the league, depending on what day you're talking, when you have the number 1 scoring offense and the number 3 scoring defense, you're just good. You're just a good team. And I don't expect them to fall off. I agree with you that there's high possibilities of problems in April and May, because that's what Winnipeg does. But I don't see them going anywhere. And so losing to that team is not a big deal, but it's 3-0 in the first period, which is a problem this team has had all year. Just the defensive liability and breakdown is just astonishing. And that's something that's happened all year as well. The consistency there. I don't know how they fix that part. And it was the thing that you and I, like, we talked in the summer going into the training camp. Like, hey, the offense isn't the problem. The goaltending is not going to be the problem. Special teams should be the best they've ever had. The only question we had going about this team was trading a dependable Ryan McDonough for a bunch of young players who are sort of okay. And now half those players are gone off the team because Barry Trotz has removed them. So defense is, while the young players look very talented and promising, defense has been, and I think still is, the main problem with this team.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is that going back to what you said before about how the only constant has been the inconsistency. And that's what makes this so hard to pin down. Like, yes, defense is a problem, but that hasn't been the only problem this season. I mean, it was the problem against Winnipeg for sure. But I think if you look at, earlier in the season when this team couldn't score goals, that was the problem, because with the pieces that you've added and, they're not performing, team couldn't buy a goal. And honestly, we saw a little bit of that against Winnipeg too. I think they hit 4 posts, 2 of them in the first period. Like, it was one of those. And, call it bad luck or whatever. But I think that it's that my point is that there's so much going on with this team. There's so much going wrong. And it's like inexplicable. It's hard to pinpoint and say like, oh, well, this player's the problem or this one thing is the problem. And that's what makes this so, one, difficult to pinpoint, but 2, incredibly frustrating, because by all measures, this team should be better than, not only than they are now, but they should be better than the team they had last year. And again, going hindsight 2020, I'm not saying right now, I'm saying if you go back to July, I think on the surface, replacing Ryan McDonough with Brady Shea is not a bad move. It's not like that much of a step backwards. I actually thought it was an improvement because, based on everything we know. Now, again, obviously in hindsight, that does not appear to be the case, but I think at the time, you didn't feel, it wasn't like they got rid of McDonough and then added no one. I mean, they added a really solid piece in Brady Shea. So that's what makes this so frustrating, is that it's like they've done all the things, they've done all the right things, and they're not, it's just not working.
Wouldn't you say that trade, though, that swap, let's call it, it was, I think even at the time, I agree with you. I said the same thing, like, oh, it's not that big of a step. It's a different type of player. Like, Shea's a better offensive player, better skating. So maybe trading some defensive dependability for some offensive upside, I think was the trade there, or the swap that they decided to make. Basically same contract. It was basically a 1-for-1. You're getting much younger, but certainly you're not getting the same defensive player. And I think we knew that going in, but now I think you're right. In hindsight, it's been a significantly bigger downgrade than we expected, or that it should be. And this goes to, and I think really interesting conversation for Patrick and Dogs coming up in just a second. I want to ask you, Emma, but what I think is interesting is people probably hear me say, oh, the defense is the main problem. And they go, wait a second, this is the lowest scoring team in the league. They can't find any consistency on offense. But like, I look at the talent on the roster and I go, it was only a matter of time before Jonathan Marchessault started scoring goals. Forsberg is in this long streak. He breaks it, of course, last night, but like, I'm not worried about Philip Forsberg scoring goals. Like, he's going to score goals. Like, you can't do anything. You can't make a move or have a conversation about, oh, the offense is broken because we need to get rid of Philip Forsberg. Like, that's not a rational conversation. I don't know if, while I love the young, promising pieces that, of course, the Predators are developing, whether it's Stastny, Willsby, Blankenberg, you name it, they've all been a little bit more prepared for the NHL than I expected. The talent, the raw, pure overall talent, is not there on the defense the way it's there on the offense. And even when Roman Josi is having his worst season that I can remember, like, that's because he's doing too much. Like, and I'm not trying to get on the like, let's bury the Justin Barron trade yet. I'm not there yet, but it's not been good. It's not been good. And they've tried him at different places, and it's not been good, Emma. It's the nicest way I can put it.
Yeah, no, it has not. It certainly has not. And, I think looking at, like you said, that it's a good point about the offense. It's like sometimes, this happens and that's not the most glaring issue. Like you said, defense has been an issue. A lot of it has been the moves that have been made, first with waiving Dante Fabro, trading Alex Carrier, and then going back to McDonough, like you said earlier. It looks like, I think right now, because those things happen, those moves happen, and then now we're seeing the defense is not good. First of all, I would like to point out that the defensemen are not the only people responsible for defending on the ice. Just want to point that out too, because
very valid.
The defense of the forwards has not been great either. But I think the bigger picture here is people, they're upset, they're angry because this is not working out the way it was supposed to. They want to blame someone or something. Everyone starts yelling at Barry Trotz, and they hate the moves that he's making. Other than the Onanen for Wedgwood trade, I feel everyone hates every move that Barry Trotz has made. And it's like, okay, I am getting roasted for this, for being a Trotz apologist. Like, I'm not paid by the team. I owe them nothing. I am not required to say nice things about them. I am not sitting here saying, yes, Justin Barron was an upgrade over Alex Carrier. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is you can't look at each of these moves in a vacuum. And I think that just realistically, it is so early into Trotz's tenure. I know it doesn't feel like it because losing makes everything, it makes time stop. But I think that it's still so early into his tenure that we're not going to see the full picture. We're not going to see, we're not really going to know. And it's hard. And we said this last week too. You can't really make these like sweeping generalizations about Barry Trotz and as a manager and about all the moves he's made as a collective, because it's still so early.
I tend to agree. And I think there's a bunch of comments here about this exact topic. So Patrick says, and I think this is an interesting thread to pull on here. Patrick says, I think Trotz is GMing like he's still a coach. Keep tinkering with the lineup until it works, except for now, those are trades instead of scratches. I don't think that's necessarily an unfair conversation to have. We don't really know if that's true, because all the players that have been moved have been given a lot of time with multiple coaches to be good and have not been. So I don't necessarily think each individual decision is all that like reactionary. I think in totality, he has GM'd a little bit like an inexperienced GM, and that maybe his background is being a head coach for 20 years in the NHL. So of course he's going to lean on his expertise in that area. Patrick also says, to be fair, Shea's learning a new system and hasn't had a consistent partner since he got here. I agree, but you're getting paid $7 million to make that happen faster than 40 plus games. I'm not picking on just him here, but like, you make a lot of money to adapt to a new system before the season starts. Like, well, I know it takes time, but
and he's had a consistent partner here recently in Blankenburg. And I will say that in general, this is the best that Shea has looked this season, is when he's had the consistent partner in Blankenburg. And even that had been great.
Yeah.
So
Kevin says kind of what you're saying here, Emma, which is not a fan of every Trotz move, but honestly, I don't think we're going to see the picture for a couple of years. And he's no Trotz apologist, he says. The other one on here is, let me make sure, because you guys have added a bunch of new ones here. But basically, Kevin says this. Basically, of all of those moves turn to dust if a couple of these prospects really hit. We won't even remember them. About the Tomasino, Parsonen, Glass, Fabro, Carrier class of player, I totally agree. If Adam Wilsby is a starter for the next 6 years, then Fabro and Carrier is irrelevant. If Fedor Svechkov is a starting top 6 center, which I think there's a chance he could be, and frankly, open mic night at Zany's, like if he wants to do all this stuff and he's that good, the Tommy Novak contract isn't as important, Like I totally get that, and all of that is hindsight, Emma, right? Like, oh, we moved McDonough for Shea. Well, it hasn't worked, so we can judge it now. I think there's all that kind of stuff. It's the same thing with the veterans that have been signed to score a bunch of goals that didn't fit into the system right away. Well, like let's look at the Marchessault deal. He's older, but that's not an exorbitant contract. Like $5.5 million is not a huge amount of money for a guy who's right now your leading goal scorer. Like he could be the leading goal scorer by the end of the year, and he's been, I think, a good fit in the system and has done his job. It took him a while to get going, but that's a dependable piece that I think is going to contribute the way he's contributing right now.
Honestly, I think of the, the big three of Stamkos, Marchessault, and Shea, and I said this from the beginning, I still think it's true now, that Marchessault has been the best fit for this system. He's like tailor-made for an Andrew Brunette system.
Yeah.
He's fast, he's scrappy, he hunts pucks, like he does all the right things. And so, yeah, maybe it took him a while, but like you said, he's scoring now, and I don't think anyone's sitting here saying that Jonathan Marchessault is the problem. I just think as a team, it's still like, I don't know. Earlier in the season, how many times did we come on here saying like, it looks like these guys have never met before. Like they just look so disconnected and they, look so incohesive. Now, that doesn't seem to be the case anymore. They seem more like they've taken a step in the right direction in terms of playing more as a unit, particularly at 5-on-5. But that is where, it becomes even more, ambiguous and nebulous. Is like, okay, so what the hell is the problem if they're not, like, now they're playing together, but it's still not working. And I think that that's kind of the, again, to your point and to my earlier point, I think that going and looking at this team as a whole and looking at what the individual moves that Trotz is making, again, I'm not defending them all and I'm not saying they were all great. I'm saying we don't know what they are yet. We're not going to know for a couple years.
Jeffrey says a rookie GM got excited about a team that overperformed last year and tried to accelerate the process, and it didn't work out. I think that's a fair assessment of what took place because there's not really a lot of opinion in there. Again, the excited about a team, fine, but like the facts are true. Like they overperformed and then they accelerated the process. Now, you've pointed this out a lot, which I think is important to note. He did so without mortgaging any of the future of what would have been maybe a deeper rebuild. The lone exception being the goaltending situation. That's the only one that you could go back and say, we're going to go a different path. And I think we've said this since the beginning. The original decision in the Choose Your Own Adventure is Juuse Saros. That's it. It always has been. And I'm okay with Saros being the path they chose. I know you are as well. But if you were going, we've done this exercise. If you were going to go a different path that doesn't include spending meaningless cap space on really good players, supposedly, the only other path was to trade Saros for a deeper rebuild, give Lingan in the crease, and try to bring Askarov up as quickly as possible. That's it. That could be the decision that makes or breaks the franchise, but nobody is, like, very few of you were like, I don't like Juuse Saros.
Yeah.
like very few people were like that. And the contract is way under market now. He's still very good. So the offense-defense thing is really interesting because I want to go back to the game last night, which is partly why I'm thinking like this. The offense, like part of the, because Josh says this, defense has been pretty close to middle of the pack based on XG. To me, the story is still the offense. They're basically the worst offense in the league from an actual production standpoint. My issue is not based on the metrics. It's based on the talent and what you can do to fix it. You can't fix the offensive pieces. You have them. They're veterans. They are what they are. You can't change Steven Stamkos. You can't change Philip Forsberg. You're not going to get rid of those pieces unless you're doing something totally different. My key is the game last night, the first period, for example. You play really well on offense. You have chances to score. You are forechecking. All four lines are in the offensive zone. You're doing all the right things. Sure, they've got the guy who can stop all those pucks in Connor Hellebuyck. That is what it is. You're on the road. And you give up three different types of goals in three different types of ways from three different types of player. And I know they were talking about this on the broadcast. Oh, they can get scoring from everywhere. Well, don't allow that. Don't screen your own goaltender when Morrissey's on the blue line with a blast. Don't allow Kyle. They completely allowed Connor to walk into the net and just go at Juuse Saros. And then the other one, of course, is this crazy scrum where the fourth line's pushing people around. And then, again, Blankenberg makes a mistake. They're trying to clear the puck. I don't really fault him for that. But the point is you got beat in your own zone over and over and over again. And then they started the second period the same way. And that was the problem in the first month of the season, in the first 2 months of the season, right? Which is odd man rushes and high danger chances and hanging out Juuse Saros. I get why people look at the numbers and say the defense has been better. But from a talent and from a what can I do to fix this standpoint, you can't do anything to fix the offense. It's more talented, and they're stuck where they are. The defense has been, in my opinion, I'm more concerned with the defense, even though the long-term talent looks more promising. Although, I don't know, LaRue and Svechkov look pretty good. I think those are two young pieces that are going to be on the team for a while, in my opinion, at least.
Yeah, I think with the offense, like you said, you can't change who these guys are. And a guy like Philip Forsberg, for example, is, he finally broke that scoring drought last night. This is a guy that, if you watch the Predators long enough, he tends to score in bunches. So that's just who he is. That's how it works. And maybe this opens the floodgates for him. That would be great. But I think that, like you said, the defense, and it's not just based on numbers, because the numbers really don't tell you everything. People like to look at numbers and freak out. But I think that if you're actually watching the games and watching the play of the defense, a lot of the decision making with or without the puck has been concerning, to say the least, on defense.
The lack of coverage.
Yes.
That's been since the beginning of the season.
Yes. And I think that it's hard to pinpoint, and you can't just put it on one guy and say this defenseman is the problem and get rid of him and the whole defense is fixed. That's not, or change this one thing and the whole defense is fixed. I mean, it's not that obvious to me, at least. And so I think that it's difficult. I mean, the personnel changes are definitely part of it. I mean, you have the fact, with all the injuries they've had, Josi was injured, Lauzon's injured again. Then you've got Carrier getting traded, Fabro getting waived. There's been a lot of moving parts, and that's, of course, going to take a toll on the defense. But I mean, honestly, I think you look at the guys like Willsby before he got injured, excellent. Stastny, it's only been 3 games, but looks really good. And so it's not just you can't just blame the new guys or be like, oh, it's these young players coming in and they don't know what they're doing. I mean, arguably they've been the best ones. And like you said, I think the effort's there on defense. The effort is there, and for the most part, and Saros has been Sarosing. I know that his numbers and, his goals allowed obviously don't look great, but I mean, there is no, he's just not getting any help, and he's turning in these outrageous performances, which is what he's getting paid to do. Technically not getting paid to do until starting next year. But I think that the goaltending is not the problem. We're going back to, what it was a couple of years ago, where Saros is the one keeping these guys in games, and they are not, they're not giving him the support.
Yeah. Jeffrey says, I hope that he turns, I'm assuming you're talking about Trotz here, Jeff. I hope he turns back to focusing on the prospect, because now there are a lot of exciting pieces here. We're going to get to that in a second, because I do think we need some positivity, and I think there is some there. And you just mentioned a bunch of those games. What Askarov does this season doesn't matter. It's down the line. I agree. As well, Brando asking Braden, any word on more Pred shows than just once a week? Not for free. You can listen to myself and Adam Vingan on Lower Broad Hockey. Go subscribe. We do appreciate it. Nick Keyser's now writing some stuff for us. You got the weekly newsletter from Emma, of course. I've got some stuff coming on the right-handed, left-handed shots that you on the chat were all very excited and interested about. So I might pop into the locker room and ask some folks about that this week. And of course, lots of the young prospects. A lot of people requesting more Svechkov. That's going to be a thing. Which does lead us to an interesting conversation about I heard a lot of folks talking about the Askarov personality thing again, which is coming back up again. And I feel like it's one of the most overblown parts of evaluating Barry Trotz's decision than of anything. So maybe I'm wrong on that, but that's been my opinion there as well. I do want to get to some of these young players. Steven Stamkos injured, of course. It looked like Evangelista came back into the game, and he left after the big hit in the back. So we'll see what happens there behind the goal. But Stamkos, unsure. I think Brooks didn't give us anything, said there was no report or no information yesterday after the game, but like they're not going to give us any information.
Yeah. I mean, this team does not play another game for 3 days. They're not giving us any information until they absolutely have to.
We'll see if he's skating around before practice or something, even though we're not supposed to. We'll see. Can't report on that. But even going back to your point and some folks talking about, defense, offense, goaltending, like the Calgary game is another one. Justus Annunen played great. It didn't technically count as a steal, but like they got beaten that game by all intents and purposes from a metric standpoint. He kept him in it, and then they capitalized on a couple power play goals, and that's it. That's how you steal the game on the road.
Well, I say the first period in particular. I mean, that first period was all Calgary. They were just taking it to them. And if that had gone differently, if the Predators had not had strong goaltending in that period, that game could have ended very differently. And so I think that even though it wasn't for the whole game, in the moments where Calgary was the better team, Annunen kept them in it. And that's what we've been seeing all year from him and from Saros. And they're just not getting the support they need in front of them.
Patrick asks, was the Evangelista hit dirty? It looked like there was some extra leg work to the hit, but it could just be his untrained eye. What do you think, Emma?
I don't think so. I think it was a clean hit. It was an unfortunate landing for Evangelista, and the way that he kind of crumpled into the boards awkwardly. I know that I think that Predators fans don't like Logan Stanley because they remember when he fought Alex Carrier, who's about half his size, and broke his collarbone last year. So I think
I forgot about that.
Yeah. So I think people already don't like him. I don't know. It wasn't a dirty hit. It was an unfortunate landing, but I mean, the hit itself was fine.
Yeah. So I want to get to these good young pieces and see what you think about who's earned a kind of a permanent spot, because we are reaching a territory where they do need to start considering, like Gus Nyquist is another example of like, what the hell? And I don't mean that for him. I just mean like waving your hands wildly at the world. Like, it's just, this is a guy who has this goes back to our offense defense conversation. How do you fix what's going on with Gus Nyquist? Well, he's played well in the system before. He's a veteran NHLer who's got sort of a pretty clean resume. We know what he is and what he isn't. He's excellent. He's probably the best puck entry guy on the entire team. And you just like, it's not there. Like what's going on? But that's a piece you can move. And if you are starting to see good young developed talent and you're still last or second to last or third to last place and you're 15 points out of the playoffs near the deadline, you have to be willing to move on some of the pieces that are movable to continue building, because it's not working. You can still build around Marchessault and Stamkos and Josi and Forsberg next year, but right now it's not working, and you got to capitalize on your situation the best you can. The young players are a big part of that. So I want to get to that in just a second. But before we do, I want you to tell everybody who the gold standard is brought to you by. I'm going to put you to work, Emma, because I do all this all the time. You got to do this now.
Sinkers Beverages and Shotgun Willie's Barbecue.
What should the good folks... So here's what I want everybody to do. Send a bunch of random tweets to Emma, at Emma_Lingan.
Why are you doing that?
Wishing her happy birthday. Like, just do it today or tomorrow. I know it's not your birthday.
No, it's not.
And I want you guys...
Everyone wish me happy 21st birthday. That's when you're allowed to do it.
I'm sorry you could not pay me an amount of money to be 21 years old again. Now, 31 sounds nice. but 21, no chance. But I want you to I want everyone to go into Sinkers and just be like, no, Emma likes this. I'm going to, and just tell the cashiers, like, Emma loves champagne, so I'm going to buy some champagne. Like, just go in there and make the whole trip into Sinkers about Emma Lingan's birthday. I don't know how to do that. Y'all are out there. You listeners are amazing. You're creative. I want it to be about Emma's birthday, which I'm not going to tell everybody when it is, because I don't know.
Well, it's this month, because I already said that.
But I don't want to out your birthday. I don't want to out your birthday. So
people, I like bubbles, whether it's in the form of champagne or beer.
If you want to buy Emma a drink, you can do it at Sinkers Beverages.
Yes. And yeah, that's you're allowed to do that. Don't tweet at me, but you can go buy me a drink.
If you're going to tweet, pretend it's blue sky and be nice.
If you can tweet at me if it's nice, but I can't take any more emotional dumping from angry Predators fans because I'm sorry, y'all. I know they're not doing well. Believe me, I know. It's I wish I had the answer and I don't, but this is my job and I'm not a therapist. So
Josh says he's going to walk in and ask for Emma's store pick and enjoy the confused looks. That's exactly what I want. I want there to be some sort of like, hey, what did Emma? Can I leave this here for Emma? And then like see what they have. Like who? No, Grant would know. Our guy Grant, big Preds fan, listens to the show. He would absolutely know. Look, you're like Cartman. Like you need a safe space, like a little glass box to protect you from all the takes. Is what you need.
Yeah, maybe Sinker's Beverages can be my safe space where they just pump me full of alcohol and just let me live.
Wow. Also, Shotgun Willie's Barbecue, real Texas barbecue, the best brisket in the city. Open 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. every single Wednesday through Sunday. That's right. You work with 440 Sports. I hold up a hat for you. That's what we do here on the podcast. All right. So the young players here. I want to ask you about the end. So I was going to ask about Saros, but it sounds like through this conversation, I've already kind of got the answer. How much concerned are you with Saros? I want to get this out of the way before we get to the young players.
I'm not concerned with Saros really at all. And that's not just because I've always been a Saros, I've always been a proponent of Juuse Saros, but aside from the one, he had a bad game against St. Louis. That was on him. But honestly, one bad game when the rest of the team has had like 40 bad games, like I'm okay with it. Yeah, I'm not worried.
I think Tuesday night, again, microcosm of the whole season, which is Saros wasn't really at fault for the 3 goals in the first period. He really wasn't. I would say atrocious defense and Winnipeg being very good. Remember, the other guys make a lot of money too to play hockey. Always important to remember. So I do think, and this is Ananen's a perfect transition from like, I'm not really worried about the goaltending. Does a 9-17 record concern me? Yeah. Does sort of the inconsistency that we've seen the last few weeks concern me? Maybe a little bit, but every goaltender has a stretch like that. It's not that big a deal, and I'm more concerned with the defense. I don't think it is fair and I think I can already see this in the fans. I don't think it is fair for the fans to expect Juuse Ananen to continue what he's doing. I don't think that's fair. I think he's a very young player who probably got to the NHL a little bit earlier than he needed to with Colorado. He's now in a really good situation where he's not asked to be the guy with a Finnish fellow countryman that can help him sort of develop. He's going to have great games like we saw against Calgary. There's going to be some bad ones. I don't want to kill the kid because of a couple of bad games, but I would expect that fans need to realize while he is absolutely part of the Nashville Predators' future for at least the next few years, and he's very talented, I don't want people to be like, oh, this is this. I heard Gover do this with you on It's All Your Fault. This is we cannot make this a Pekka Rinne Juuse Saros relationship because that is not fair to Juuse Ananen, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, and we also don't need him to be that, now like in the immediate future because you have Saros and Saros is your guy. So I think that, it's been a good trade. It's been a good move, obviously moving on, not just for this year, but for the future for Nashville, like moving on from Wedgwood was a good move as much as I love the guy. But I think that, yeah, it's, again, this is where the numbers don't tell the whole story. Of course, when the team in front of you sucks, your win percentage is not going to be good. Like, he's only one guy. He can only do so much. And so, yeah, when I'm looking at this team and their record, and not even just their record, but their performance and everything that's gone wrong, goaltending is so far down the list. Yeah. It's honestly not even on the list for me.
But if I was going to, so if we start with like, hey, who are these young players that you believe? And here's what I want to do with this. I want to remove all the context, which I normally like beg folks to make sure they're considering. But in this conversation, I want to sort of remove the context and say, it doesn't matter how many wins they have, where they are in the standings. Forget about sort of like what Barry Trotz's next offseason strategy is going to be or who the coach may or may not be. Like kind of forget all of that. And just like look at the individual player and say, who has earned the opportunity to play more for this organization, whether there's a glaring weakness and a spot for them to play or not. Like, just I want to kind of remove all of the extra context that would change the conversation around like, oh, what's the starting lineup going to look like next year, which needs to have all that context, versus just which of these players do you think have proven they belong in the NHL and deserve an opportunity to compete for playing time for this team, especially if they're terrible and especially if players are injured, with Lozon and all the trades they've made, and Stamkos now getting hurt. And Ananen, I think, is absolutely at the top. Like, we could start there easily, that he and Saros should form a really solid goalie duo for the foreseeable future. I don't know why they need to go get a second goalie now, at least as long as Juuse Ananen is not asking for trades or wanting to be a starter like the other two guys that could have been here. I don't. They're kind of set for at least a couple of years with Saros and Ananen, and I think he's proven the right to be the backup for as long as he wants to be the backup behind Juuse Saros.
Yeah, that's so many more, pressing needs, I think, on this team, and goaltending has been like the one solid, again, like minus I would consider at this, just for this season alone, the whole Askarov Wedgwood drama thing, like that's honestly, like, it's kind of a hiccup in this year. Just this year alone. Yeah. Because Askarov was not going to be the guy. He wasn't going to be the starter this year, even if he stayed. So it's, I think if we're talking about, I mean, are we, can I answer the question now of which young players have earned?
Well, go if you can go position group, like start with, I was going to go goalie and then offense and then defense, but if you want to go, you can go.
Well, okay. Well, goalie, yes, Ananen has earned. Yeah. He's earned the backup role as long as he wants it. I think it's a good situation for him. Like you said, he was probably rushed into the NHL, but then almost like a de facto starter for Colorado when Georgiev was just failing, and so that was a lot of pressure. It probably, it was too fast. He did well, and I think that experience is ultimately going to serve him well in the long run. But now he's in a much better situation with Nashville, where he's not being relied upon to be the guy as much as he was in Colorado. So I think that, this is it's a good situation. So I think he's earned it.
All right, let's go defense here, because this is the more interesting. I think the offensive weapons, it's a pretty obvious two guys. But I think on defense, I'm curious, because I think there's a little bit, like, Blankenberg is an interesting case study in this conversation. Like, he has handled himself very well. He looks like an NHL player. And then there are times he kind of is what he is, which is an undersized forward turned defenseman who wasn't overly talented, but has made the best of his opportunities. And sometimes he just gets pushed around by a big power forward. And I think some of that is just sort of what you're getting with him. He's the one where I'm like, I don't know. I think there's a chance he could be a nice third line defenseman. He looks like he's comfortable in the NHL. Very good skater, certainly very feisty, slippery, I believe is the other word you've used. I think the defense is more fascinating, and there's more opportunity for someone to step in and take a spot.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll start with Blankenberg since you mentioned him. I like him a lot, and I like him a lot for Bruno's system. I think that he's kind of that quick, he's kind of the agitator, the puck hunter. Like, yeah, he's not a big dude. He is what he is, but he's fast. He's small, but he's fast, and he can agitate, and he can hunt pucks, and he can, use what he does have to his advantage. I like him a lot. I think that he fits really well in the system. And I like his hustle. And I think that he and Shea have complemented each other pretty well on that second pairing. Adam Wilsby, obviously injured right now. He did practice with the team, or he skated on Tuesday before the Winnipeg game. So that gives me hope that maybe he's back soon. I've been really impressed with him as well. Honestly, it's unfortunate because the one I would say bad performance he had was his last game before he got injured. And that was against Winnipeg, where he was, kind of directly responsible for giving Winnipeg a 5-on-3. And, you know what? It happens. Things happen.
Clear the puck, big guy.
Yeah.
Don't think, just ice the puck.
It was so much like it was like the exact same thing that Mark Del Gaizo did
Yeah, that's
earlier
right.
against New Jersey, and it was like, y'all, like, we get it, you're young and you're eager and you want to prove yourself. It's like, you don't need to make the play. Don't make the play. Just get rid of the puck. So anyway, that aside, but that's like, again, to that end, you know, you've seen it now from multiple young players. That's just what you're going to get with a young, inexperienced defenseman, and you got to learn somehow. So overall, I've been really impressed with Willsby. I think that he also has looked very comfortable at the NHL level. Doesn't look too big for him or too much for him. Really like him. I think Stastny, I mentioned this earlier. Spencer Stastny looks like he has not missed a beat. I mean,
Yeah.
he is flying out there, and that's his thing. He can skate. And you know, I know that we've had some words about Luke Shen on the show before, but I will say that I think that Shen and Stastny, I have come around to them as a pairing, because sometimes Stastny gets roughed up a little bit because he's a smaller guy. And Shen is out there to kind of take care of business. So in that regard, I think that they're a good pair that way. I would like to see more of Stastny though, because I think that what he lacks in size, he has in speed and his
Yep.
ability to just disrupt plays on the offense, because he's, you know, he's in there like mixing things up with them. So that I've really, again, small sample size, 3 games, but I've been really impressed with Stastny since he's come back.
I think it speaks volumes. This whole like weird thing that happened in the offseason, I do think it speaks volumes to the Predators' view of him, how this is all played out. And I don't mean that in like a nefarious way at all. I just mean like it's clear that they're committed to him.
Yeah.
I think it's clear last year. It's clear based on the playing time, how they've handled him, both in the minors and here and through this whole personal situation. I think it's clear that they are like, they put him right in coming as soon as he was available, basically. Like he went down and played how many games did he play? Didn't he play a few games in Milwaukee? 10. That's it. And like he's back up into the big club playing, ready to go. You don't move Carrier and Fabro, I don't think, with as quickly as they did for what they did, if they don't trust some of the other pieces. And I'm not saying that I don't trust Blankenberg or Willsby either, but like I think Stastny is the reason they felt comfortable where they are. One of the other things that I during the game, like Mason's talking the whole time about how they might need Winnipeg's. The only thing they might need is like a big physical defenseman. And I'm like,
Can we interest you in Jeremy Lauzon
or Luke Shen for that matter? Give me a call, Winnipeg. Just give us a call. Yeah. Could be a good trade. Could be a good way to get the Luke Shen contract off the books. Although, strangely enough, I'm coming around on Luke Shen having a way more value to this team than people realize in terms of maturity and leadership. The serial leader thing
as well.
The serial leader thing is such an overplayed punchline on Twitter. I get that, and that's not what I'm saying here. But if you're going to have a defense core with Stastny, Willsby, Blankenberg, maybe Del Gaizo, who knows, along with Barron and Lauzon, like you need a Luke Shen. You need a player of his type that's in that room.
Speaking of
not to turn this into a Luke Shen love fest here, but
no, let's not get crazy here. But okay, continuing through the defense.
Yeah.
Jeremy Lauzon. He has become a penalty machine, and this is not good, because I mean, it's obviously not good, but I think that he's also one of your top penalty killers. So that really good penalty kill that this team supposedly has really is taking a huge hit every time he ends up in the box. Of course, he's injured now. I just think that he has looked a lot less defensively responsible, and just less disciplined this season. I'm not quite sure what happened there. Almost like he's trying to do too much a little bit, and that's resulting in him landing in the penalty box a lot. So he, in my mind, has become expendable in the sense that he is a left-handed shot, and the Predators have a huge backlog of left-handed defensemen. The thing that you value with Lauzon is his size, because again, with all the guys that we just talked about, other than Luke Shen and Brady Shea, this is not a big burly defense core. So like you do need the sizes and everything, but you do need some of that. And so that's where it's like, okay.
Let me ask you a different way. If you had to pick one guy, let's say they're all up for contract today, which I know is not the case. Lauzon's got what, 2 more years or 1 more year after this one? 1 more year after this one. Luke Shen, I think, has 1 more year after this one. Justin Barron has 1 more year after this one. So maybe you don't have to even fake this one. I can just say those 3. Of those 3, who's the 1 year re-signing? I think it's Jeremy Lauzon if you had to re-sign one of them. Now, you may not re-sign any of them.
Yeah. But I mean, if it's those 3, then yes, it would be Lauzon. I mean, Shen has value now. He really, like, he's big and he's scary. He seems to be the only one that opposing teams are like genuinely scared of, which I mean makes sense. You see them any time out there. Anytime like a scrum breaks out, Shen's got 2 guys like all the time. He'll fight the whole team, and you know he's kind of the one that like is the big imposing presence on the defense. However,
Luke Shen fights everyone.
Yeah, Luke Shen fights everyone. And he's also older and he's
You're not going to re-sign him.
You're not going to re-sign him. He's old, he's slow. Like
Justin Barron has not shown me anything and had a couple of questions about the trade. If it was exclusively a salary dump, that's fine. You don't normally do that for a player you have to keep on your roster for 2 years, but whatever. I think they thought they were getting a lot more out of Barron than we've let on. We'll learn more about that trade as we go because it was clearly about salary. Some of it was about salary, but there's nothing, unfortunately, and I'm not trying to be rude here, but like there's like last night, it's just like mishandling pucks and not being they put him with Yossi and it's just like still not there. It's just not it. And based on scouting reports, no one in Montreal thinks it's it. I'd rather have Lauzon than Shen or Barron long term. There might be a better option in the farm system, which we're going to get to. Ultimately, the point of this conversation is there's one big takeaway for me, but I do think here's the thing about the defense core. If I told you in 2 years, so not this season or next season, but the following year, you have Roman Josi. I don't know why I said it that way. Say what way?
Josi.
Josi. Roman Josi, Stastny, Wilsby, Molendijk, Andrew Gibson, Jeremy Lauzon. How do you feel about that 6? That's no Barron, no Delgaizo, no Blankenberg, no Ufko, no Gravel. Where are you at on that 6? Do you feel like that's the 6 that could rise to the top?
I feel good about that 6. Yes.
That's 4 prospects that hit. That's a big deal.
Yeah. And that's why, and again, I'm not saying that, yes, that's what's going to happen because we can't see the future, but I'm saying this goes back to what you were talking about earlier about how like the Carrier trade and whatever, it's a failure, whatever. It's not going to matter in a couple of years if that scenario happens. And right now we have no reason to believe that it won't. And there's still, like you mentioned, there's still some other good pieces in there. I would maybe not include Gravel in that. I think he's your consummate next man up if you need him, because you know what you're going to get from him. He's kind of the defensive Mark Jankowski, I think. So
do you think Delgaizo and Blankenberg fall into that category to some degree as well?
It's tough. I really like Mark Delgaizo. I also like Blankenberg. I think if between those 2, if I had to choose one to stay in this system, in this organization, I'm going to go with Delgaizo. I just think that
you're saying between him and Blankenberg, not between them. So here's my thinking. There's 4.
Yeah, I'm saying between him and Blankenberg.
There's 4 that are getting playing time now, and the ultimate goal of this conversation is you need Molendijk and Gibson to be in this conversation next year. They need to be the Stastny and Wilsby of next season. That's what they need to be, whatever that means whenever they come up. But this season, you've got Stastny, Wilsby, Blankenberg, Delgaizo, 4 young defensemen that have come up through your system that are starting to get playing time. You cannot assume that all 4 are going to stick. Assuming that 3 are going to stick is probably unlikely. So which 2 are you picking? I think it has to be Stastny and Wilsby, I think. Right.
I agree. I think if you have to pick 2, that's what I would go with. Del Gaizo for me right now, little bit of a tweener. I think that he's too good for the AHL, but he's not quite there yet for the NHL. So it's a tough situation, like timing wise for him right now, but that could also make him a very valuable trade asset, down the line here.
Yeah.
And so he's also, again, left-handed shot. We got a lot of those. So gotta, that's why I'm excited for Gibson to come up, because Gibson and Molendyk together, I mean, we saw this at World Juniors for Canada. They, Molendyk, he's fast, he's the skater, we know that. He's more offensive upside. Gibson is more of your traditional defensive defenseman, big body, blocks a ton of shots. Like, I think that there's absolutely reason to believe that those two guys hit. Whether it happens at the same time, Molendyk might be on a little bit of a faster track than Gibson is right now, but the point is you have options on defense, and I think that right now that's a good problem to have.
I just rattled off like what it could be 2 years from now, and I did not include Brady Shea, which is really dumb of me.
And I didn't even notice that.
It's just so part of that is indicative and an indictment of what's happened so far, and it's a problem for us to. So again, if Josi and Stasny, Shea and Willsby, Molendyk and Gibson in a couple of years or a year and a half, or at the end of next season, I think that's a sort of a perfect scenario. And I think ultimately there's a lot of good young talent that we're seeing right now, whether it's on and in, whether it's the guys we just talked about or the guys we're about to talk about on offense. I think it's all positive from a development standpoint, which was going to be the plan for this organization, whether they went out and signed a bunch of free agents or not. And that is a good thing. That's a good step in a year of bad. That's a good. But I think the key here is that this is a good, solid development and a good wave. The most important thing for this franchise is a second wave of these guys. There has to be another wave, and that's for the defense. That is Molendyk and Gibson next year. That's the next wave that has to come. Great that we all believe in Stasny and that the organization believes in him, and great that Willsby has kind of shown that he might belong up here, or that even Blankenberg is a good seventh defenseman or whatever. Like, this is all good stuff, but there has to be another wave of another influx, and that's the same on offense. Like, if we're already counting Evangelista long-term as part of the future, which I think we can do to some degree, Fedor Svechkov and Zach Leroux, I think, have proven that they belong in the starting lineup for now, especially on a bad team. Like, let them learn. Let them play. Let Leroux learn from his mistakes. Let Svechkov continue to develop. His skill set is really intriguing. It's everything that the prospect scouting report has said. It's everything that we've seen from him, and his personality is wonderful. This team needs a little freaking like lightheartedness around it right now. So I think he's a really good asset for a number of reasons. He's not going to be great. He's going to make mistakes, but you want him to learn and grow. I'm assuming you kind of agree with those two for sure, which just seems obvious.
Yeah. I would also add to what's promising in the game against Winnipeg. Obviously, Stamkos left with that injury, and at that point, Evangelista was also out, so you're down to 10 forwards, and so you've got to like double shift guys and move things around. And I thought it was pretty promising and pretty, kind of surprising, honestly, from Andrew Brunette that Svechkov was the guy that was double shifting and centering that top line with Forsberg and Marchessault, with Stamkos being out. I mean, that says a lot. Again, it was a injury, like out of necessity situation, but typically Brunette would not be the guy that he would go with. He'd be like, all right, get Colton Sissons up there, like it would he would kind of go with more of the known commodity, and he didn't. And I think that Svechkov held his own, and I think that that's a good thing.
I want to see more of his hockey.
Right. And I think
that's where I'm at, because
you don't know what you don't know. You don't know what you have until you know.
What's the point of him playing in Milwaukee?
Right. So, I mean, that's the point. I think that now, if Stamkos is out long term, does Svechkov come and center the top line, for the foreseeable future? Probably not. But I mean, just the fact that he was given those opportunities in game is a good sign, and I want to see more of that. Same with Leroux. I think obviously, he'll be eligible to come back on Saturday against Washington, which I assume he almost certainly will. Because
you think Svechkov wants to play in that game?
against Washington.
I imagine he
Yeah.
wants to play against Alexander Ovechkin.
Yeah. Every young Russian player
Yes.
wants to play against Alex Ovechkin.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And now if you're going to be without Evangelista and or Stamkos, it's a good thing you're going to have Leroux who can come back in. Again, I think that he, everyone wants to talk about, I'm not getting into this again, but like everyone wants to talk about his past pre-NHL. That doesn't matter at this point. It's what he does after this event, how he learns from this, if he learns from this, and how he behaves afterwards. And that's what, again, you don't know what you don't know. That's what I want to see.
I don't think Vinny Hinostroza qualifies in this conversation, so I'm not going to include him. But it is worth noting he looks comfortable. I don't think he's making a lot of plays, but he looks comfortable.
Well, he's got like 370 something NHL games. He better look comfortable.
And then Ozzy Weisblatt's is kind of the only other one that's like, honestly, when you look at the forwards, there's not a lot of them who have been called up and given time that count as like a top 20 prospect that is sort of being banked on for the future. I think we can point to Svechkov and Leroux and say, give them as many minutes as they can handle. Like, let's see what they develop into, because again, what do you have to lose? You are a bad hockey team right now. And now you're losing players and you have open times. Cole Smith's on IR and Stamkos is hurt, and maybe eventually, like, give the young guys opportunity here. What I think is interesting is, again, this is where the next wave has to be the thing. Like, it's really great that all this might be happening, right? This first kind of wave, whether it's Stastny, Willsby, Svechkov, and Leroux, like, great. The next wave is the key here with the young players, and whoever that means. Is it Joakim Kemmel? Who does that include? I don't think it's as clear as Molendyk and Gibson being the plan, but they need another wave of these guys, because right now we can check a box and say, sure, we both agree that Svechkov and Leroux belong here, and let's see what they can do. I think that's been obvious for anybody with eyes, but what's the rest look like behind them? There's a lot of unknowns there. There's a lot of unknowns. And, I know Edstrom played, I didn't really watch any of the juniors. I know you were kind of paying attention to it, but it seemed like we had some guys that played pretty well in that situation.
Edstrom looked good. He's the kind of headliner that they got back in that Askarov trade with San Jose. Joey Willis, who's still not signed with Nashville, but he impressed me a lot in training camp, and then he went and he won gold with Team USA. Spoiler, actually, for It's All Your Fault, Jeremy K. Gover and I are going to be talking to Mr. Willis for next week's episode, so make sure you tune in for that.
Didn't Stiga play?
Well, he scored the game-winning goal in overtime. Yeah, that was his only goal of the tournament, but I'd say that's a pretty good one. Yeah, I mean, all of these are promising pieces. I still think Stiga's a few years away.
Yeah.
Edstrom and Willis we might see sooner. You've also got, and it's unfortunate because he's been injured for a lot of the time, but you've got Austin Roost, who's in Milwaukee, but again, not playing because of the injury. So, I mean, like, you have pieces, but I also think this is where your 3 first-round picks, especially if this team finishes pretty high in the draft order, this is where you need to go get some forwards.
So I'm not trying to paint like a rosy picture on a bad team, but I think we can end this conversation with some semblance of positivity. And you can call me Gover if you want to, but I think if you were to look at the trajectory of the farm system, and if you were to tell me that this organization was going to find 4 starting pieces, 2 defensemen and 2 forwards that were homegrown in Svechkov, Leroux, Stastny, and Willsby, that those 4 were going to, by the end of this season, we were going to say, you know what, those 4 have earned they're making camp next year. Like, no question, they're making camp next year, or coming out of camp on the roster, I should say. And especially with Onanen now behind Saros, so you're going to find a backup goalie, a long-term backup plan. You're going to find 2 forwards. You're going to find 2 defensemen, and none of them include Molendyk, Gibson, Kemmel, any of either the 2 first-round picks, obviously from this past year, and then you're going to add 3 more first-round picks. And like, I think you can start to make the case for, look, they need to go young here, and it's a good trajectory for the future. I don't know what that does to Stamkos, Shea, Marcia Show, O'Reilly, Nyquist, even Forsberg and Yossi are getting up there. I don't know what it says about the plan for all those pieces, but you can start to see the vision a little bit if these things if they continue to happen and there's nothing else to celebrate.
Well, I think even putting all of those veteran pieces into one category is overlooking the fact that Nyquist is a UFA after this year. He's gone after this year. You've got Marchessault and Stamkos signed for a few more years. O'Reilly's only one more year after this one. Like, it's none of these guys really were meant to be, other than Shea, and you can have that conversation if you want, but like none of these guys are signed super long term and intended to be a key part of the team's future. I've always looked at these guys as more of a stopgap, because you have this promising young talent, but they weren't ready yet. And the last thing you want to do is force them up into the NHL before they're ready.
How do you message that though? Like, we're going to pay Stamkos $8.5 million to just
because
hold the place for 3 years, and you're not going to get good hockey out of the deal. Like,
but
that's a tough sell.
It's more than just that, because first of all, you are getting good hockey out of Stamkos, and you got to pay the $8 million if you want him at all. That's just what you have to pay.
I guess I mean the whole thing, not just him, but like what he represents. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I say, like, calling them a stopgap is like dramatically oversimplifying it, I think. But it's not just that. It's not like, oh, just put someone in there until the young guys are ready. Because if you're going to do that, you can sign a whole team of Vinny Hinestrozas and accomplish the same thing. The point in signing
30-year-olds.
Yeah. The point in signing Stamkos and Marchessault is and O'Reilly and guys like that. And, you know, we talked about it earlier. It gets overused a lot, but the whole serial winner thing, they want the young guys to come up in a culture with, maybe the team right now is not winning. I mean, they're certainly not winning right now, but they are with a bunch of guys who have been there, done that, and they know what it takes to win. And they want these young players and these prospects to come up in in an environment, in a system that fosters that kind of thinking, even if the results aren't there. And so that's why I think it's important. And we know that to Barry Trotz's culture is extremely important. And that's why you go and get those guys that, you know, again, if you have Steven Stamkos on your roster, of course you want him to score goals. He's not just there
sure,
like just weekend at Bernie's, like mentoring these young children. But I think that you want him to produce, and he has been. So I mean, again, I don't think that I don't think anyone's saying this. And Steven Stamkos, I keep using him as the example, but I don't think anyone is saying like, oh, he's blocking a spot on this roster from someone. Like, who are you putting in over Stamkos? Like,
no, I agree. No, that's ultimately it's almost like and they can't do this, but it's almost like the team needs to message that part of this better, which is, look, we weren't close. We overachieved. We got to Vancouver and we played really well with a bunch of guys who had career years and aren't the part of the long-term plan because they are way too old. Schenn, O'Reilly, Nyquist, etc. And while we are very excited about the future of our franchise, they're not quite ready yet. And so we want to bring in some veteran pieces that can give us a chance to succeed this year. And it's our fault in the media for maybe taking the bait on that and going like, oh, Western Conference final or second round, or like, I don't think we were wrong to have those expectations. And the team is not going to come out and intentionally lower expectations. No team does that in any sense of the word, unless you're sort of like so bad that you have to come out and be honest about it and say, look, we're not there yet. We're building for the future. We're going to continue to give young guys opportunity. Like,
you're San Jose if you're
exactly, or Chicago 2 years ago or whatever. Like, you can do that, but it's hard to sort of be honest with fans. And this is my biggest issue about Nashville. I'm okay with being patient with Brunette. I'm okay with being patient for the young players, and I'm okay with using unused cap space to bring in some pieces that can take care of the team until then, right? What I don't want then is prices for tickets to go up for the average fan. I don't want it to be like, don't sell us on competing at the highest level for a division championship or playing deep in the tournament, and then don't Don't do that to the fans if you know full well that this is sort of like we're still not quite there yet from a development standpoint. Our young players are not quite ready yet, and that's going to be our real push to a championship. It's hard because that's not what the message was sent to the team on July 1st. And with the signing of Saros, it was like, we want to compete for a championship right now. And then, like 6 weeks in, Barry Trotz is on the radio saying rebuild. Like it feels like some of the expectation and the messaging don't line up with like reality to some degree.
He was on the radio saying rebuild 6 weeks in. He wasn't saying I'm going to start rebuilding right now. I think he was. I know. He was saying like, yes, obviously I'm aware of what's happening, and that process is going to get accelerated if this continues. And that's just him doing his job as a general manager. But again, like you said, messaging, whatever. I feel like it's all 2020. Hindsight's 2020 because no one saw things going this poorly this year. So maybe that wasn't the ultimate intent, that it's like, all right, just hold on until Mollendijk and Gibson get here. But that's kind of where you're at now, and you have to adapt on the fly.
Yeah, I think really good messaging strategy would be a little bit of patience. We're going to stick to the Nashville identity. And oh, by the way, you are noticing, though, a lot of promotions for tickets that are cheaper. Hey, come on, get a 5-pack for this amount of money. Get 3 packs with here's 2 tickets for $69 and you get food. Like, they're starting to realize that they need to go back to being the old Predators. Because if you're going to do it the old school way with development and hard work and all this other stuff, I'm okay with going back to that. Like, I think that's okay, but you got to kind of mirror the fans' expectations, the team, and sort of what's happening on the ice. And right now it doesn't feel like they're connected, but again, we're at the end of an hour and 20-minute conversation here. So, but I do think there's something to that. And you're starting to see it, 2 tickets for $69 with like food. That's a lot cheaper than they used to be.
Yeah. I got to give a shout out to, I know from my inside sources that the graphic design team has been working overtime with all of these new ticket deals and promotions and things to try to sell tickets. Yep. Props to them. They're working hard.
I got 4 people into the building for $24 a ticket. They got to start matching the market value with that. And if they do, I think fans are like, you know what? I'm okay paying $24 to watch Svechkov, Stasny, Willsby, and LaRue along with Forsberg and Yossi and Saros. Like, I'm okay with that. But don't tell me we're going to win a cup and that we're trying to go win a cup and then charge me $69 a ticket. That's where you got to start matching it all up, which is okay if they do that. So, I mean, It doesn't make people happy, but we're not too far away from that being the plan last year. Going into last year, that was the plan, was to rebuild and reset and restart and develop. That was the plan. They just got a little too big for their girdles. All right, that's weird to end it on that, but I will. Emma Lingan at Emma_Lingan, of course. Thanks to all you guys for jumping in the comments and asking questions. You guys were super active. Lowerbroadhockey.com, please check it out. This team, no matter what they do, we're covering it for you. And we got some really good prospect stuff. The guide is still up there, so if you want to dive into all the names, the top 25, Michael Gallagher did a great job building that PDF. It's still there, and it's still very relevant. You can go check it out. We'll probably try to do an update of that sometime this spring. Otherwise, Sinkers Beverages, as well as Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. Make sure you check out 2 award-winning local businesses that are Preds fans, that are Preds supporters, and they are locally owned here in Nashville. So go support those good local businesses that do really good work for you all, that support this show being free for all of you guys. So there you go. Otherwise, welcome back to Nashville. That was a brutal road trip. And welcome 2 more first-place teams coming to town. So there we go. Let's see what happens. Emma, thanks for hanging out. Good to see you. Happy New Year. Happy birthday, whenever that is. Enjoy it. My name is Braden Gall. We'll talk to you guys next time. Thanks for hanging out. Peace and love.